Welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we believe life is in the light, spiritual darkness is the enemy, and finding and following Jesus is the best way to live life. I'm Scott Langhans, your host, joined today by Craig, the co-host, and we've got a guest today, which we'll get to in a second, but wanted to let everybody know we've got a special bonus episode coming out this next week. So I already actually recorded it earlier. People have asked us, Craig, have they asked you, like, hey, you guys, can you do this like podcast thing 2 or 3 times or 8 times a week?
Yeah, I've gotten a couple of requests along those lines.
And I don't even know if it's because it's good. It's because they need something to listen to at work. Like, honestly.
I think it's option number 2.
Okay, is that? No, I want to think it's because it's somewhat valuable. Because we're just all about helping you follow Jesus. Like, what does it really mean to follow him? Hopefully give you something to think about and take some action on. So these bonus episodes are just going to come about organically, and they're short form. So they're going to be 10 minutes or less. So basically, this bonus episode was, I spoke a couple weeks ago about the power of God, and I get to the end of the message, and I knew I spoke enough. I just knew at the end I had way too much, and I look at the timer clock, and it was at the zeros, and I knew I had about 8 more minutes, and then we had this prayer experience, a moment together, and I was like, I cannot even start in.
Time to be done.
Like, part of it, like the immature part of me wanted to say, skip it, we'll just move. So anyways, I was like, man, when can I share this again? Like, it's a whole message. And then I was like, let's just put out a bonus episode. So these will come out just kind of organically out of maybe...
Not necessarily every week.
Yeah, just content out of a message maybe, or something in our culture, or something in the podcast maybe one of us wants to dive in on. So it'll probably just be one of us. Maybe it'll be 2 of us, but...
Or maybe a response to a question that you have.
Yeah, maybe something you're wondering about. And it's just one clear idea. To kind of cut through the chaos and the clutter of like all this stuff that comes at us. One clear idea in order to help you follow Jesus. And again, just real short format, something to think about. And it's just going to be on the podcast format, just for production, ease for myself, honestly. So still looking for like a sound engineer / tech producer person. So if you're like a YouTube only, this is your opportunity to jump on a podcast. Figure that out. Subscribe. So if you already subscribed to the podcast, it'll just show up automatically in your feed. You don't need to do anything different. The graphic will just have like a header that says bonus episode. It'll be a short one. So it'll come out here in a few days. So that's fun. Looking forward to that. Mm-hmm. But we do have a guest here with us today, Pastor Paul McArthur. Do we just go Paul? What do we do?
Straight
just
Paul. Please, Paul.
Just please, Paul.
Yeah.
Please, Paul is
Pastor
with
Paul?
us today.
Yeah.
Paul?
Reverend Paul?
Yeah.
Just
Paul.
His Eminence?
Yeah.
Paul?
Okay, that's better. Yes.
Okay.
Paul is here. You're a friend. We've known each other for a long time.
We have.
We went to college together.
Yes.
Which was a few years ago.
It was.
You
It was
and your
just
wife,
a few.
Amy, we all went to school together at Northwest University.
We actually lived on the same floor together for a year. Do you remember that? Or did you black it out? I think you did.
I did black it
Yeah,
out. What do
yeah.
you mean we lived on the same? On the 400 floor?
500 floor, buddy.
You were on the 500 floor?
Right across the hallway from you.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm dead serious.
I thought you were always on the 200.
No.
Oh my goodness.
For the early years, and then I decided to come over and be a duck for a year.
Really?
And then I ditched you guys.
See, that's probably why I blocked you out.
Yeah.
The ditching part.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. Who was your
Surprisingly.
roommate?
Eric Hall.
No, he wasn't.
Oh yeah, E Hall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Now I do.
It's ringing a bell.
Now I do.
There it is.
Man,
Right
maybe
there.
Eric Hall would tune into this episode.
He might. He might, Mr. Philosophy major.
Right? Oh my goodness.
Actually,
All right.
Dr. Hall now.
Yes. I have not kept in touch with Eric, but yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, Paul, you're a pastor. You are in Elmira, Washington.
I am. Elmira out in Lincoln County.
People are like
Middle of nowhere.
Googling that. They're like, I've never even heard of that. Is
Down
that
the
real?
Highway 2 corridor.
Right? If you've been down Highway 2, you go like Reardon, Davenport. A lot of folks have been out that far.
Yeah.
They
Mhm.
didn't know there was stuff after that.
I know, you just got to keep going.
They didn't know Creston,
Highway
Wilbur.
2, about every 10 or 15 miles,
Yeah.
there's a wide spot in the road.
That's exactly it.
That's what it is.
With
And
some
they
grain
call it-
elevators.
and some grain elevators, and
Yep.
they call it a town, and then the road continues, and then there's another wide spot.
That's
You
exactly
got
it.
Reardon, and Davenport, and
So how many
Creston.
people are in Elmira?
So we have, in town and then also outside of town, about 250 people.
Do you guys segregate it like that? The
Oh, yeah.
in-towners, the
Oh,
out-of-towners?
yeah, definitely.
Is there different? Because out-of-towners, you're a farmer, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
So you got the farmers that live on the North Ridge, and they're kind of the up-to-duty people. They're the ones that they kind of live in their own world up there. Then you got the in-town people that, they may work for a farm company or whatever, or work for the dam, the Grand Coulee Dam, or own a small business. And then
Gotcha.
you got those that are south of town that's a little more of the ghetto version, if you will. Am I allowed to say that on this podcast?
I don't know.
But
it's your
okay
town.
with us.
You're not talking
It's
about
your
it.
people.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So, like that, and that's always curious to me, and I want to dive into that today too.
Okay.
Is people are hearing that like a town of 250, which is the whole like region, right? You guys are spread out by miles.
Oh, yeah.
10, 20 miles probably, the Elmira.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
But yet there's still all these sub-communities. And
Yep.
I'm just always curious about that. We're always drawn to smaller groups. And like people would be like, I could never live in a town of like 200. That's ridiculous. It's so small. But yet we're always still drawn in community to even smaller groups.
Yeah.
Smaller groups. I don't know. It's just always curious to me how God designed us. And you guys are close. If people are Googling it, you're, 30 minutes from Grand Coulee
Yeah.
Dam?
We're like 30 minutes south of Grand Coulee.
So have you
And
ever
you're
been
also
out that way?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to help people reference, like, if you've never been to Grand Coulee Dam, you got to get out there. Get the laser light show this summer. It's a fun spot to tour and check out.
It's pretty big time out there, I'll tell you what.
It transformed all of Central Washington. There's a lot of cool history there.
You're real close to Coulee City and Heartline.
Yes.
And some of the other communities there. So you're actually drawing from a larger population base than just the 250 people whose zip code is Elmira.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Heartline, is a major metropolis of 150. So we got
you
that.
put together ACH, you got, man.
I mean, Coulee City's the big one. Well, and Wilbur too. I mean, you're familiar with Wilbur.
Yep.
And so Wilbur's like 600-700.
Wildcats.
Coulee City's like 600-700. So yeah, the Wildcats.
The booming.
Yeah, we
big.
draw from mostly like Wilbur and Heartline and then Elmira. Those three towns are where our Elmira campus is draws from. Yeah.
So we lived in Wilbur, which is one town over, 13 miles, 12 miles?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. 82 to 86.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So
82 to 86, and then the population of Wilbur was about 1,000.
Oh, wow.
big time.
Yeah, it was
More
1,100 in the
Wow.
80 census.
Man.
And then it continued to shrink.
Yeah.
You said that with such pride, Craig.
You really did. That was beautiful.
The big town of 11. Because Craig's from L.A., so like he had to feel
man.
real good
Oh,
about going to
a little
1,000.
bit of a change.
Actually, I don't say that with pride. I just remember the 1,100 because when I was receiving the call, we were living in Bellingham, and I got the call about the church in Wilbur. And Cindy knew it was one of those calls because we'd kind of been looking. And so she was paying real close attention to what I was saying on my end. And I was making notes, and I wrote down 1,100, and she thought, oh, no, is that the monthly salary? We have more than that right now coming in, and we barely can make it. Oh, no. And then she thought, oh, is that the size of the church? We've only got 100. I don't know if we can handle 1,100 people. When I got off the phone and explained to her that was the population of the town, she said, oh, that's out. We're not going there.
Shocked.
Because even Bellingham at 50,000 at the time was culture shock for us. Wow. Because L.A. and San Diego are where we each grew up and met in San Diego, and so Bellingham was small town living for us.
Yeah.
Wilbur is just like, forget it, right?
It's a whole different world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different.
And it was a metropolis compared to Elmira even at that time.
Absolutely. It still is.
Well, Paul, I didn't say this, but thanks for being on the podcast and driving all the way in
Hey.
to be in person from Elmira.
My pleasure. Listen, when
We
you live in
appreciate it.
Elmira, you got to drive an hour and a half everywhere. So coming to Spokane's no big deal.
Yeah, you probably got a few other things to do today. Or
Oh yeah.
pick up.
Oh yeah. When you make your trip to the big city, you
got a
got to
list.
take advantage of it.
That's right.
Yep.
That's how
And
that
so
works.
Yep.
So you're here. We'll jump back into the small town stuff. But how did you find Jesus? That's one of the questions we ask all of our guests because it's just fun, but it's also encouraging to hear
Yeah.
people's stories of how God is at work and how other people were instrumental in you finding Jesus. So tell us your story.
So mine is a relatively vanilla, if you will, story. It just my mom took me to church. She loves Jesus and has her whole life, and so I grew up going to church with her. And at 4 years old, I responded to a a question of, do you want to follow Jesus? And so I did at 4, and at that age, you don't really know all the implications. I guess even at 42, I don't know all the implications of what that is. But that began my journey, and throughout my life, I just sought to learn more about him and allow him to take over more of my life, and try as my best to become more like him.
And that's a moment you remember at 4.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's helpful for a lot of folks listening in, where they would have maybe a similar story where family members, parents, somebody in their life introduced them to Christ early on, but it's still really real.
Absolutely.
And we have this tension and this struggle of like, but I don't have Craig's story of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll before
Right.
Jesus. And so somehow the life change that happened in my life is maybe less than, because we don't
Exactly.
have this really dramatic before and after. So how do you help people with that as you're pastoring people, as you're helping people? Because you probably made a lot of more decisions along the way.
Oh, for sure.
Pivotal points of,
Yeah.
like you said, figuring out what it means to follow Christ. But how do you help people with, a similar story going, hey, no, it's still like what Christ did in you and is doing in you is just as valid as someone else's story?
Well, I think, A, that's a great question. B, I think that what it comes down to is we've all got our own stories. And so when it comes down to it, God uses different experiences. He reaches us at different ages. And whether your story is a dramatic Paul at Damascus story that radically transforms you in an instant, or whether it's something that happens over time where Jesus begins to shed his light in your life, and you begin to open up to him more and more, and it may be quote unquote less exciting in a story form, but really when it comes down to it, the gift of Jesus and seeing his hope and understanding the salvation that he brings, like that's the greatest miracle that there is, no matter what your story looks like. And so I think it's helping people to realize, hey, wherever you're at, whatever Jesus has done in you, however long it took, however dramatic or not dramatic you might think that it is, the miracle is that he's done a work in your life and taken your dead spirit and resurrected it so that you can understand the way the Creator made this earth and what life is really about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And whether it happens at 4 or 40 or
Exactly.
82, it's still more about what Jesus has done than
Yes.
who we are in our story.
And Jesus made that point with his disciples. Remember when he had sent them out and they experienced the miraculous? I mean, there was supernatural stuff happening. And they came back all excited, like people are getting healed. And we even had authority over Satan. We're casting demons out of people. And Jesus said, yeah, don't marvel at that.
Yes.
Don't revel in that. Here's the thing to revel in. Revel in the fact that your name is written in the Lamb's book of life. That's the biggest supernatural, miraculous thing to revel in.
It's a great point. Yeah.
That our names are registered in heaven.
Yeah.
Elevation worship, they came out with a song. Like
That's a great
those
song.
lines are in there, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, no, that's Jesus talking.
Yeah. It is.
That the miracle that I'm still marveling over is that my name's registered in heaven, that I have eternity in my heart today, and I get to be with Christ forever. And that's the miracle. Because I have a similar story where early on, I remember being 3 years old and responding to the call of Christ in my life and having that be a real thing. And then as we're growing and maturing as physical people, but also as spiritual people, making decisions in junior high and high school, and am I going to continue to choose Christ? First year at Northwest, right? Like for me, the first 6 months or so were like, dude, this is party, and I can just do whatever. It felt like extended summer camp.
Yep.
And I had to wrestle many times, like, am I, as an adult, as a man, going to continue to choose to follow Christ, or is this just something my parents did, and it was their
Right.
faith, and having to choose and be intentional with what I'm doing, and you would think it'd be super easy at a Christian-orientated university. Sometimes it's more difficult.
Yeah.
For me to go, no, I'm going to choose to follow Christ. I'm going to serve other people. I'm going to be intentional with that. And it was a couple-year journey on that.
Well, because it's easy to coast, right?
Oh.
Depending on the environment that you're
Yeah.
in, it can be really easy to just, live in the emotion of what others are experiencing. And when it comes down to our experience with Jesus, we've got to have that individual, personal connection with him, that's what sustains us, not necessarily just being in a group and experiencing what everyone else is experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't follow Christ by association.
Right.
Like, oh, because they're doing it, or I'm sitting
Yes.
here and kind of connected. That's not how it works. God's
Exactly.
looking for hungry people. He's looking for like, no, who do you say I am? People. And like, well, my wife says. Well, that's not the question. Like, but who do you say I am?
Yeah.
That's how that works.
Yeah, for sure. There's a transition there in both your cases and both your stories. Transition from your parents' example to you owning your own faith. Somebody years ago coined the phrase or the saying, "God doesn't have any grandchildren," to kind of get at that.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, He's just got kids, right? And so we're not the kids of kids. You know, we're not riding anybody else's coattails. We either have our own faith or we don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another question, what's something for you over the years that has just been an emphasis for you following Jesus, and therefore as you're helping people, what it means to follow Jesus? Like, what's something that is kind of more highlighted for you when it comes to following Jesus?
So we've kind of already hit on it, and we can drill down further depending on how much you want to do that. But I think really when it comes down to it, it's just simply keeping the main thing the main thing. It seems like in church we can, or even in the Christian world or culture or American Christianity, we can get distracted or focused or on other things. And really when it comes down to it, it's the heart of the gospel that really needs to be our foundation. And if we allow ourselves to get drawn off into other things, then it not only gets us in trouble, but it can create, and people see that, and it can turn them off to what really should be the heart of the way that we live. You told me that last week you started talking about the book of Galatians.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, that's ultimately in Galatians 1, what the Apostle Paul is calling the church in Galatia 2, or the churches in Galatia. He's saying, listen, you guys, there's some people out there preaching things with wrong motives. And they're out there, they're the Judaizers, they're wanting you to, to focus on circumcision. And really, when it comes down to it, we got to focus on the heart of the gospel, Jesus changing our lives, resurrecting us. And if we can stay focused on that, then that is, well, let me just say it this way. I think really often we underestimate the power of the gospel.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, because it's the power of God at work in our lives to change our lives. And like you said, in Galatians 1, verse 6, Paul is astonished. He goes, I'm astonished that you guys are so quickly deserting the one who called you by the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all.
Right.
Yeah. And like you're saying, why are we getting off track on the good news that is the power of God to change our lives? Why are we get focused on the color of the carpet?
Yep.
Or the format structure of a small group, or
the style of music,
Yep.
or the attire of people that are either presenting or participating in some sort of, quote, church gathering, right?
Yep.
And you're like, wait, what are we focused in on? Why are we deserting the good news and transferring like the power of Christ to some sort of human argument or human effort thing? And God's like, get back on track.
Exactly.
It's to love God, to love others in the power of the Holy Spirit. That's it. That's the clarity of what it means to follow Jesus. And it's so clear that it seems like we need to complicate it and make it more complex, and therefore it gets off track.
Well, we're really good at doing that, right? So like
making up our own stuff.
Well, especially in America, like we are the most educated culture in history. And we love to learn. We love education. The problem with education, Paul says it great in Corinthians. He said, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And so as great as it is and I love education, I'm all about learning more and all of that. But we need to remember, sometimes I think people, they get bored with the message of the gospel. And it's because it's stayed up in their head instead of translating down into their heart and realizing the depth of the power of transformation that can happen, not just in a conversion, salvation sense, but in a big word, sanctification, living out and becoming more like Christ the rest of my life sense. And then when we do that, it plays into other areas of our lives that we don't even realize that we've ignored the power of the gospel. And so we miss out on certain things. We miss out on certain promises in Scripture because we've allowed the knowledge to puff us up instead of Christ's love build us up or build the church up. And so I think that's a trap, a cultural trap that we can easily get in, that we need to fight beyond to really allow the transformational power of the gospel to continue to work deeper and deeper inside us.
That's well said, Paul. And I was thinking about our culture as you were sharing what you did. In our culture, there is an appetite for knowledge and learning in a way that plays to people's ego.
Yes.
There's an arrogance. It's like, yeah, the gospel, that's simple, that's great for you folks, but I'm more sophisticated than that. I'm more intelligent than that.
Yes.
I'm more learned than that, and I'm not so foolish as to believe something so simple and childish as the gospel of Jesus Christ. And unfortunately, that arrogance, that ego, that puffed upness that knowledge brings, that gets in the way of the gospel and gets in the way of a relationship, and people in many cases fall away from their relationship with Christ because of it.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
It really is.
Yeah, because we've made this artificial distinction between like hearing something and then applying it to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think that's two parts in life. Like, oh, I heard something, but I didn't do anything with it. Where that's kind of a newer thing, a Greek philosophy thing, where Jesus is saying that to people, like, hey, if you have ears, like, listen.
Yeah.
Like, were people deaf? Were they not hearing? No. He's saying you're missing the application part, the actual transformation of God in your life, that you're trying to separate it, and that's just not how life works. And so we do have this information age, Google at our fingertips.
Yes.
Before we were like on air, I was joking but serious about like, how do I find things in the Bible? I Google it. I type
Right.
Bible, Paul, like loving, not taking grace, sin, and I just type like a phrase or whatever, and it pops up. It's like, whoa, there's a verse reference that I didn't memorize in college, that I paid thousands of dollars for. But we have this information, but God's looking for transformation, and that's what we are looking for, is our lives to be changed and our lives to be different. And so just like, oh, I know about that. We're not looking for just knowing about if we're honest with ourselves. And God's not looking for just know about me. There's this mysterious kind of thing, but not really mysterious, where at the end of time, Jesus is going to say, I don't know you. We didn't know each other. And ball's in our court on that one, where do we really want to be known by God? I'm going to open up my heart, open up my life, and to be known by Him takes action on my part, takes a vulnerability, a transparency to be known by Him. He knows me. He knows my thoughts. He knows my prayers before I even ask them. He knows the number of hairs on my head. But do I want to be known by Him personally? That's my choice.
You make a really good point, Scott, and you're referencing a passage that for me has been just powerful over the years, especially as a leader and a pastor and a teacher of others. The thing that just unsettles me, just unglues me sometimes when I think about it, is people that I had opportunity to influence, people that I taught, people that were in my church or whatever, over the years. I just shudder at the thought that they would stand before Jesus someday, and then Jesus would say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Just unthinkable, unacceptable, unimaginable to me.
Yeah.
But the other part of that you also referenced is it's not Jesus saying, "You never knew me," which is also true, but the focus in when He says that is, "I never knew you."
That's a good point.
We often talk about, well, do you know Jesus? How well do you know Him? I want to get to know Him better. Those kinds of things. Yeah, how well does He know me? Well, He knows everything, so He knows me fully. Yeah, but, and you were getting at it, are we letting Him actually have access to our life? Sure, He knows everything about us, but that relational dynamic is another story.
Right, we're inviting Him in. Does He not know what's going on? Sure, he does. He's God. He knows everything. But is there an interpersonal relationship dynamic where I'm going, God, here's my heart. Search me.
Yeah.
Like, show me my life. I surrender my life, my will to you today. So, yeah, it's a powerful thing. And you're in a context now with Elmira and Grand Coulee where you're helping people to follow Jesus, to understand this grace of God and the keeping the main thing the main thing. So I'm curious on that. You've been there for 14 years now. Yeah. And you grew up in Belfair, right?
Belfair, Washington, baby.
Shout out to Small Towns
That's
USA.
Right. That's
How
right.
big is Belfair?
And where is Belfair?
So Belfair is over on the west side of the state.
The Kitsap Peninsula.
Yes, Kitsap Peninsula, over
wow.
kind of Bremerton-ish area.
Sure.
A lot of people, oh, Bremerton.
Yeah,
Bremerton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I reference it.
But it's like 30 minutes outside of Bremerton.
Yeah, and it's just north of Bremerton. Like there's the Kitsap Peninsula, and then Belfair's in Mason County. And Belfair, like, of the whole area, is kind of considered the redheaded stepchild of the area. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that.
Well, you're redheaded, so that kind of works
so
out.
I fit in well, yes.
Right on.
Is that saying even politically correct?
No, it's not. It's
today?
not, so I apologize.
That's all right.
But when you're from Belfair, like, you don't care what's politically correct.
Right.
So it's just how you're raised.
There you are.
Which we'll stop there.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We're equal offenders on this podcast.
Okay,
we
fair
just
enough.
offend everybody.
Yeah, okay, good.
There you go. That's how that goes. So how big's Belfair? You like small town?
Oh boy, I don't even know now. It's such a different town now than it was when I was growing up. It was probably 8,000 with all the little suburbs of Belfair around it. Probably about that when I was there.
Yeah.
And
You're kind of a small town guy.
yeah. Oh yeah.
When the town's only 6,000 or 8,000, are the outlying areas actually suburbs?
That's how.
Sure. Yeah.
We just consider like when you're from, whether you lived in Allen or Tahuya. I mean, you got to love some of the names. Tunerville, that's always great.
Tunerville?
Great View, yeah. All those you just
Great
like
View.
say
You're
you're
just making
from
those up.
Belfair. You'd think I was making that up, but look it up on the map and you'll find out
Like
those
Todd
are legit
Stoppelfeld, he's from
places.
Great View.
He lives in Great View.
He wouldn't say Belfair. He would say Great View.
Oh, would he?
I don't know.
Oh, see, I love Todd.
Yeah. I don't know. We're getting on some tangents. Small
We are.
town USA geography.
You gotta love it.
People are like Googling it now.
Do it.
Like it's like Starbuck, Washington, right? People are like, that's
Oh,
made up. You hear other names.
You would sure think that was, but I've driven through there.
So Paul and I were friends in college, and apparently across the hall.
Real
for
good,
a-
Scott.
For like 10 months of my life.
Yeah.
No, I do remember that.
Obviously made a huge impact on your life, so
It's
that
a
was
long
good.
time ago. No, anyways, we've stayed in touch. He's always been in youth ministry and church and pastoral stuff. But then the craziest thing was, 2016, so 5 years ago.
Yes.
Amy and I, my wife Amy, getting into triathlon. We've been doing a few races. Been racing for a few years. Ironman Coeur d'Alene started to offer the 70.3 distance, which is half the distance of an Ironman. And so it's the first year in 2,500 people. No, it was like 3,200 people. It was sold out that year. It was full. And you rack your bike with your age group. So all the males, 35 to 39, were racking our bikes. And I'm on the rack, and I'm laying out my gear and get everything situated. And I look down the row, and there's a 6'6" tall, redheaded dude. And it's early in the morning. You're getting stuff figured out, and I'm triple checking. I'm like, "Is that Paul McArthur? What is happening?" So I walk down. I'm like, "Paul, what are you doing?" He's like, "I'm racing." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" It was shocking to say the least. And then
It was shocking for me to even be there.
right? And I was like,
I am not a try guy.
"No, you're not a try guy."
No.
And you're like, "I started training like 3 days ago." So
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't 3 days.
No, but it was more like 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah, it was close.
It was close. And so we're racking our bikes together, doing Ironman Coeur d'Alene 70.3, and you finished. You did it.
I
That was your
did.
goal.
I
was
barely
like,
made it, but
"What are you
yeah, I
trying to
finished.
do?" You finished, but it was shocking. And now
Well,
you decided that wasn't enough.
yeah. So now I'm signed up for the full here, June 27th. So never.
We are 6 weeks out. And how many triathlons have you done since 2016 and now in 2021?
So 0 in between the
Okay,
two.
0 in between.
Yeah. 0 races, 0 marathons, 0 any of that. So it's all or nothing for me. and
Right.
so
You
why
gotta have a
not give
big
it
goal.
a whirl? And so yeah, we're going for it.
Hopefully, you've got more than just 3 weeks worth of training behind you.
I'm preparing a little bit more this time. So
6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks is because it's double the
It's
distance.
double, there
So
you
you
go.
got to give it double the time.
No, you've been working hard for months now. And
I've been trying,
surprisingly
yeah.
to me, you've got like in the town of Elmira, you've got some like quality people
We really
coaching
do.
you up.
Yeah.
Like super good cyclists.
Yep.
Like a high level swimmer.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You're
High level
telling-
swimmer, high level
Better.
cyclists. We actually got a guy. He goes to our church. He's doing it as well. He's 60. He's 62 or 64 years old, and this is his first full.
Wow.
So
Isn't that
I'm
awesome?
excited for him. Yeah.
In the small community. I love triathlon because it's just community. There's
Yeah.
So trying to help you out. So I got you
Uh-oh.
a gift today.
What?
Yeah, for being on the podcast,
Dude.
but also want to help you out because if you're training for an Ironman, which includes a full marathon at the end, your sock game better be like high level.
You know what's funny about this?
So I didn't know where your sock game was.
No, my
but-
sock game is nowhere right now.
Okay.
I was actually looking up this exact pair. I'm not making this up. Like 2 nights ago.
Sounds good on
I
the podcast.
almost,
though,
I
Joe.
know it does, doesn't it? I almost ordered them online. Then I'm like, nah, I'm going to Spokane on Wednesday. I'll go to Fleet Feet and pick up a pair. But you already did that for me.
I got you. I got you a pair.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man. You got to have that high level
Yeah.
sock game going.
I realized that on my run on Monday, my feet were burning, and I'm like, dude, some things have to change here.
Yeah.
So
you don't
yeah.
want your whole day to explode because you got tiny little blister on one little pinky toe, which can like just be painful and crippling. And so there you
Dude,
go.
thank you very much.
Get your
Appreciate
sock
that.
game on. Get,
I will.
Get yourself a few more pairs.
I'm gonna enjoy that. Okay.
They're not cheap, but they're worth it.
Yeah.
They are worth it, every penny. I've been running those for the last couple of years.
Have
I
you?
love it. Yeah.
Sweet.
So I bought myself some too.
Dude.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's super good. So you're doing the full. I'll be out there cheering. Not doing it this year, but out there cheering for you and everybody else. It's a fun adventure to go across the finish line. So back to small town.
Okay, small town.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, let's
'Cause
talk
you got
about
this
it. It's
amazing
always fun.
community, and so you even referenced earlier. Maybe somebody caught it. You got the Elmira campus.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. What you're doing, Elmira, Grand Coulee, some of the opportunities that God's put in front of you in Grand Coulee, and who you're reaching and how you're reaching them.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
I think that's fun and encouraging to help maybe some of our listeners, myself included, break out of our current mold of like, how do we reach people with this good news of Jesus? You know, the clear message of the gospel.
Yeah. So about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, church closed down in Coulee Dam, and it's just a beautiful. It's like a historic building in that town. And so, anyways, got a hold of the denomination to see what they were going to do with it, and they didn't know. And they asked if there was anything that we wanted to do with it. like literally turned it around on me, and I'm like, well, and so I kind of just explained to them some thoughts. And they, over the course of a few months, our leadership team was meeting with their leadership team, and they ended up gifting us the building. And so in October of 2016, we started having services down there, and we planted a campus down in Coulee Dam, and that has just been a lot of fun. It's been a whole... It's amazing how different the two campuses are. I didn't realize that going into it. Just a little bit of distance in between the two is a lot of change.
Just the
but
cultural difference.
cultural
between
differences,
The towns
yes.
Is what
Well,
you're saying.
Elmira
yeah.
is very much a farming town.
Yes.
And Grand Coulee, not so much. I learned that when
Yes.
we were in Wilbur. Wilbur, another farm community for sure. And then we planted a church.
You did the
years
similar
ago
thing,
in Grand
yeah.
Coulee. And I realized real quick, it's different culture down there, and it's just 30 minutes away.
Yep, it really is. Yeah, it's not farmers as much as it is, federal Grand Coulee Dam employees, and then also the tribe as well, and
Right.
so and then small business owners as well. But yeah, it's a completely different mindset. They both handled COVID much differently than each other, and so it's been an interesting journey with all that.
Wow. And so, so the last 5 years, been doing both campuses.
Yes.
And tell us stories about like doing stuff in the bar. I think that's
Okay.
fun. I think people will be like, hey, what?
Yeah,
like,
for
and I
real.
think that's just such a Jesus thing.
Yeah.
You know what also is a Jesus thing when a church building is like shut down and they don't want to just sell it for profit, but they're like, hey, let's continue to use it for the kingdom, and the kingdom is greater than any little subcategory we've created. I always applaud that. I'm like, that's the kingdom of God right there.
It absolutely is, and that was their exact heart. I mean, it was an amazing experience to work with that team of people, and also extremely humbling for them to trust us with that. So a couple years ago, well, let me back up for a second. So I said earlier I grew up going to church. My mom took me. My dad was never a Christian. So they remained married. My dad passed away just about a year ago. He was not a church guy at all. So he loved his beer, and he loved going to the bar. And so I grew up going to church, but also, kind of one foot in, one foot out as far as, my parents go. And anyways, I didn't realize over the course of time how much that would affect me. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the alcoholism part. That, yes, that did affect me, but that's a different story. But now, 20 years removed from college, 20 years of being in full-time ministry, and I've always kind of felt like, as far as church goes, I love the church. I love what Jesus has instituted with it. But I don't know that I've always felt like I fit per se, even though I've been doing full-time ministry for 20 years. And so I found myself kind of going and hanging out in some moonlighting, if you will, at some bars in Spokane, and not knowing what the church would do, but my church would think about it. So that's why I'd be going to Spokane, because small town talking, all that stuff.
How many bars are in Elmira?
0.
Okay.
Yes, 0. Elmira has nothing right now except a gas station.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Okay.
But
So
we might
when
be
you
getting a
say
brewery in a
moonlighting
few months.
To Spokane bars, what do you, just coming to hang out?
Yeah, coming to hang out and
have a drink. Or no
and
drink?
what?
Coming to have a beer or just hang out? Or?
Yeah, I'd go and have a beer.
Yeah.
And I'd literally study for my messages or whatever, and then I would pray every time I'd go in, like, God, is there something that you'd want to happen here? And I remember I was on a bar at a bar in North Spokane preparing for a message, and all of a sudden this guy comes up to me, starts talking to me, and he asked me what I do. I tell him I'm a pastor, and he's like, blown away. And so that began this journey. Him and I hung out for 3 hours that day. He went around, he was a local at the bar there. He went around, he's introducing me to all these different people. And I'm sharing with, they're asking me, what in the world is a pastor doing here? I start talking to them about the love of Jesus. And they're like, it was an absolutely amazing experience. And he's since moved away. He lives over in the Midwest now, but we've remained connected and continue to talk. And it was after that experience, I'm like, okay, God, what are you doing here? And so I started doing that a little bit more and had other experiences. And so I'm like, okay, God, you have something going on here. What if I just did a service at a bar, at a local bar, and just shared the gospel with people? And I didn't know if my leadership team would be on board with that or not. And so,
how'd that conversation go down?
It was.
I got a new idea.
It was a long conversation, because we have some that were like, "Yeah, that's awesome," and then we have others that are much more conservative in their approach. Totally get it, and understand why, because of some of their backgrounds. And so we had a long talk about it. We prayed about it. They took a month to kind of pray things through, and we met again and talked about it again, and they finally gave me the go-ahead to make it happen. And so Easter of 2018, we had our first service at a local bar there called the High Dam Bar and Grill, and it was incredible. In
Grand Coulee area.
In Grand Coulee, yeah. And then we started doing.
So what does that look like, though? When you say you had a gathering at a bar.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have no idea what other people are picturing.
Did the ushers come down and take an offering?
Yeah. What is that like? Like when you say that, what
break
that down for us.
It's pretty free form. So completely relationally based. So started out because didn't really know what to do except so would just pick out some songs that mention Jesus and things like that they might recognize. Would have that going. I'd go around and meet and talk with people. And we had signs up, and so people knew, like, if they were coming in, that there was going to be something going on.
Different live music tonight.
Yes,
than the normal.
I'm interested in the bar owner's take on this. Like,
I'll give you that in a second. Because so when I had a connection with the manager there, I had done his wedding, and so I'm like, dude, what would you think about this? And he's like, dude, let's give it a try. And so we did, and the bar owner showed up that night. I had never met him before. I didn't know where he was at. I didn't know what, and
did he show up to like check it out?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Did he just
No, he showed up. He wanted to see what was going on, and so he sat on the back table, and then I just gave like a 10-15-minute message. And went around and started talking with people. I was praying for people in the bar and stuff, and then went over and introduced myself to him. And he says to me, "When are we doing this again?" I'm like, I would love to do this again. And so we scheduled another one, did another one, scheduled another one, did another one, and then through that got a hold of a local band, and they're Christians. They play all over, and so got them to come in and do some live music, and we started doing this kind of on a more regular basis. And the bar owner would show up every time. And
is he a Jesus follower?
Well, so he not yet. So he would say to me, he'd say, Paul, can you talk longer? Now, you guys know as preachers, no one ever says that to you, right?
No,
like,
right.
It's always like, okay, come on, hurry it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, come on, let's get the...
Guy in the fourth row sleeping, you're like, I should probably wrap it up.
Yeah, he's literally saying to me, go longer. Share with us more. And one time I shared about Jesus being in the boat and, not in the boat, but walking on the water, and Simon Peter going out and stepping out of the water, and I mean he was zeroed in, glued in, and I've had some great conversations with him. He's not quite there yet as far as faith goes, but since COVID hit, we haven't met, and I've gotten several texts from him and his new manager, like, hey, when are we going to get this rolling again? And so it's been a really neat thing. I've been able to walk through with some of the people that would come regularly. They've gone through some pretty tough stuff just with life, and so been able to walk through some of that with them and try to be a positive influence and kind of point them, steer them, instead of going down a road of destruction, steer them in a direction that could lead them towards life. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, that's super fun. And I just think that's encouraging for all of us to hear is like, just what do we have right before us? And it just started with this. Correct me if I'm wrong here on this, but it seems like in your story, if I'm connecting some of the dots, that maybe you were consciously and maybe even just God was directing you kind of subconsciously, like to go to the bar and to preach the good news because of the story of your dad and, the desire for your dad to have heard the gospel at a bar.
Absolutely.
For someone to be there and say, hey, I wish someone would be where my dad was and share the good news of Jesus with him in this kind of context, and maybe he would be more open to receive it, and that's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
He got all sorts of flack hanging out with, quote, the wrong people, being at the wrong places.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm here to help the people that are, like, in need.
And the flack that he got was not from those people.
No.
It was
Right.
from the religious establishment.
Yeah.
From
Again,
the Jews.
Yeah.
They were the ones that were critical. And in our modern day culture, it's going to be the Christians that
Yeah.
are going to be critical of somebody doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And not the people that are at the bar. They love it.
Yeah.
Hey, talk longer, right?
Yeah.
They have a whole different take on it.
Because it's the path of life, and we're all looking for that. And I just think it's cool because it was every day for you. It's
Yeah.
just like, hey, I got to prep for a message somewhere.
Yeah.
And why not use this opportunity? We're real intentionally to like be on the lookout for how God
Yeah.
would use me and connect with people. And for all of us, you're like, life's just kind of mundane, everyday life. Like I'm just going to work, or I'm just going to drop the kids off at school and pick them up, or we're just doing this social thing. Like, there's way more to be tapped into what we're already currently doing.
Exactly.
Versus waiting for this thing over here called ministry or a missions trip or some sort of like big event that God's going to use us at, where God's going, oh no, you just talk to the checkout person.
Yes.
That's in
that
moment.
That's the thing about this. So like when I started doing this, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to the bar and hang out and drink some beer. That wasn't it.
Right.
It was an understanding that because of what I saw, the experience that I had growing up, it was an understanding that, hey, now the church is all about creating community. Well, what's the bar do too?
Yeah.
I was going to make that point earlier. That's exactly why some people are drawn to those environments. I mean, it's like the TV show Cheers, a place where everybody knows your name.
Exactly.
The guy that you were talking about earlier, he went around and introduced you to all the people because they know each other.
Yep.
There's a sense of acceptance, belonging. Now, of course, there's other stuff going on. They're self-medicating or escaping from their troubles. But that need for community is
be in the mug club. I want to be in the mug club.
Yeah, it's the same dynamic with a gang.
Yep.
It's a place to belong. It's a place where people know me and I can be known and I'm accepted for who I am.
So that was the conscious decision on my part. Instead of going to a restaurant where everyone kind of has their own table and you're with your group, your family or whatever, it was like, hey, if I'm going to be here by myself, then I'll take this time to study. But this will present more opportunities to create relationship and conversation with people and maybe be able to share with them the good news of Jesus. And so that was my mindset going into all of it. And it kind of just morphed from there. And like you said earlier, Scott, it definitely, I began to see the motivation. I don't know that I saw it initially, but I had an experience in Belfair at like the long-standing bar there that helped me to realize that, yeah, I do wish that, part of me doing this is hoping that maybe I could be to someone what I wished someone would have been to my dad. And I had a Jesus moment. I don't know if we have time to go into it. Maybe that's for a different time. But I had a Jesus moment there, and that's what really shaped.
What's the story on that?
So my dad would go into this bar every night. That's what he would do, and so anyways, I had never been in it before. I'd been going to different places around here, and I remember I was home visiting my parents. This was a couple years ago, and I drove by, and I'm like, I should go into the woodshed tonight. And I went and got some stuff and then was heading back to my parents' house. And I'm like, I should go into the woodshed tonight. And I'm like, no. And I had to be honest with you, some hard feelings towards that place because that was the place that took my dad. And so I drove past it again. I'm like, nope, I'm going in. So I turned around, pulled in the parking lot, and I realized that I don't even know if I had known it, but I had some really just deep inner turmoil about this place. And so I said, okay, God, I'm going to go in here if for nothing else than to just break the cycle of feelings that I have. And so, Lord, if you have something that you want to do tonight, then I give this time to you. So I walk in there and walk through the doors and sit down, and immediately this gal is like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, new guy, basically kind of thing. And I'm not a small guy. And so when there's only like 2 or 3 people in there,
you stick out.
Yeah, you kind of stand out. And so start talking and all this stuff and order some food. And then they ask me what I do. And I'm like, well, I'm a pastor. And they're like, what? It's the same response every time. Like, what in the world are you doing here then? So then she leaves and I'm eating my food. And this guy comes over to me and he says, are you really a pastor? And I said, yeah. And so he starts asking me some questions about the Bible and about just about life in general. And then he makes the statement that's really fairly common, a fairly common belief in our culture. And this is after probably about 20, 30 minutes of going back and forth and talking and all this stuff. And he says, when it comes to, and I've done mostly listening at this point, right? He says, really, when it comes down to it, I believe that I have a good heart, and God knows that. And so by this time, as we're talking about this, the gal had come back over, and she was sitting on the other side. So I'm sandwiched in between these two people, sitting up at the bar there. And I just simply said to him, yes, God does know your heart, but that doesn't necessarily mean your heart is good. And he looks at me, and he's like, well, what do you mean by that? I said, I know I don't doubt your intentions, but he was just talking about how broken the world is. And I said, you see brokenness all over the world, but you have to see it in your own life. And he was like, yeah, I do. And I said, that is the problem with sin, is it creates that brokenness in us, and we've all got it. And it's Jesus is the only one that can take that brokenness and make it whole again. And so I say that to him, and then the gal, who had definitely had too many to drink, she said, how dare you say that to him? I've known him longer than you'll ever know him. He has a good heart. I'm like, oh boy, what do I say now,
Exactly.
And he says to her, no, Paul's right. My heart isn't as good as I want to believe it is. I'm like,
good answer.
oh, Jesus, here we go. So I have, and so she was mad at me. He kind of calmed her down. She walked off again. And then him and I connect again. Or not connect again, but we just keep talking and just talk through the gospel, through Jesus' saving power and how we can't earn it. And because that's the typical American mindset, I'm going to earn it. And we're naively optimistic about the condition of our heart, unfortunately. Yeah. And that's what keeps us oftentimes from Jesus. So we talked through all that. He ended up, after a couple of beers, he ended up getting his food, and he was taking it home to his wife. And he said to me, I want to thank you so much for tonight. I'm never going to forget it. This has been a life-changing moment for me. And we connected through social media, and we're still friends and talk on occasion. And it was in that moment when I left that night, I'm like, okay, God, you do have something. There is something special going on, and there is something, you're leading me in this direction. And then it was from there that kind of springboarded with the leadership team, and then we started having services at the Hideout. That was when I decided, you know what, I don't really care what other people think. I'm going to go public. It doesn't matter, whether I'm a pastor. It doesn't matter what kind of small town I live in. God is leading me in this direction. And so I don't want to stay safe within the walls of the church. I want to get outside where he was leading me, because that's where the Spirit is at work, and I want to join him. I don't want to expect him to go with me wherever I'm comfortable or safe or whatever it might be.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And so how did you feel after leaving the woodshed that night, as far as the feelings you went in with and dealing with some of that angst or whatever you're struggling with there, as far as the woodshed took your dad and all that kind of stuff?
It was an interesting thing on two levels, and I don't know how much you want to get into it, but on the one level, complete freedom. When I felt like the shackles of things that I had kind of held, I didn't even realize were there, was free from those things. So that was kind of one end. The other end was this incredible responsibility. So I went home that night and went to bed and woke up at like 1 a.m. and I couldn't get back to sleep. My heart was stirring. And so I got in the car and drove all over. Drove actually out to, yes, it's a real place, Tahuya, and which is on the other side of the Hood Canal. And I sat. It was still dark out. I was sitting just in this dirt road and just crying and weeping and like, okay, God, are you really leading me in this direction? Are you really wanting to make this happen? Because there are people that need you, and they would never set foot in the doors of a church, but I know that your good news is for them. And so it was this incredible moment of responsibility and realizing that that my calling is not just my position within a church, but my calling is a lifestyle, and the way that I carry myself, and the trying to spot the opportunities that God brings my way, and obviously I'm saying my a lot, but when it comes down to it, that's for us as Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as your personal journey to follow Jesus,
yes,
like we talked about earlier, just having that intentionality and hunger in my own heart to follow God, and not through association, not through my parents' faith or a spouse's faith, or just like I go to a church building once in a while, so therefore I'm doing it. Like God's going, no, like who do you say I am, and what are you doing to follow me?
Yes,
not Jesus, you follow me.
Yeah,
but follow Him. And to love God and to love others in the power of the Holy Spirit, wherever, as we are going, make disciples.
Yes.
As we are going, wherever we're going, whatever we're doing.
Just quickly, one of the things, Paul, that I appreciated about what you've shared here today is that it's really not about, as I listen to your story and listen to your heart, it's not about you being a pastor. You are a pastor.
Right.
But what you've done with your life and how you live your life, and in particular the story of how God led you into ministry in bars, that's you following Jesus. This is the Find and Follow podcast, and we're trying to help people follow Jesus, and that's what you've been doing all these years. He's led you step by step. You've checked in with Him each step along the way. Lord, are you leading? Is this what I should do? And so it's not, hey, this is what pastors should do, or this is what every believer should do. Hey, I've got a new model of evangelism. Let's all go hang out in bars.
Yeah.
That's not your point. Your point is...
Some people just cheered right there like, yeah. I think you're cheering for the wrong reason. Yeah.
Some of you probably need to go and hang out in bars. God is leading you the same way He's led Paul here. But anyway, that's my point is, this is not about you creating a program or you as a pastor. This is about you as a man who loves Jesus and is doing his very best to follow Jesus. And this is how He's led you and how He's using you. And I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so as you're listening, and I hope you're just encouraged, like you're saying, Craig, what is it that God has for me? And as I am going, the things I'm already doing, your story, like Paul's story today, just God uses our story, good and bad, to bring good out for His kingdom, or maybe just something you're passionate about, and it's not part of your story, but you just have a heart for something that just keeps coming up in your heart and your mind. Maybe you find yourself like Paul in his story of like, I find myself in taking some time on a dirt road and just like, God, what do I do with this? God would say, take some action on it. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know every step. Just with the motivation of love, to love God, to love others in the power of the Holy Spirit, to take action on those things that God is using you in, and that you would see God change your life, and you would see God use you to minister to other people, that we're all changed for a purpose, and the purpose is to help people to find and follow Jesus. So, Paul, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate your transparency. I know there's people listening in and that are just like blown away by the level of your story you shared and encouraged by that. If you're out in Coeur d'Alene on June 27th.
June 27th, baby.
Cheer Paul on with everyone else doing the Ironman, dude. I'll
be at the back of the pack. So
he's the 6'6" redheaded guy who was smiling but maybe struggling a bit.
Yep.
But really enjoying every step of the journey. Those,
absolutely.
Finish line feels are amazing. So you'll be able to feel that in a few weeks here. And don't forget, there's a bonus episode of the Find and Follow podcast coming out. And it actually centered around this idea of being changed by the power of God and living from a heavenly power, not our human power. And how to do that real practically. So be on the lookout for that. But thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you on the next episode. You can help people find and follow Jesus by subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with some friends, and leaving a review so it's easier for others to find it.